I want to just take a moment to look at the BBC story. They've said that presenters of its flagship programmes have a particular responsibility to respect the BBC's impartiality as part of its social media review. The new guidelines come following a row over Gary Lineker's tweets. We're all familiar with those, and states that broadcasters' responsibilities extend to their use of social media. And this should be when their programme is on air, along with a 2-week window before and after transmission. The Match of the Day presenter welcomed the report on Twitter, referring to it as all very sensible. Will it work? Roger Mosey is a former BBC editorial director. Roger, good afternoon to you. Good to gauge your view on these things. So if I'm reading this correctly, Gary Lineker can say what he likes apart from when Match of the Day is on the air. And when it's on, he can say nothing at all. And he can't say anything 2 weeks before it starts its season and 2 weeks after it finishes.
No, this is the BBC, Ian. It's a lot more complicated.
Of course it is.
I mean, the BBC rightly says that you could have two positions which are simple. You could either tweet anything you like or tweet nothing at all. And they have gone for the compromise where there are guidelines about what people can and can't say. And what they've said really is that you can't do anything overtly political. You can't attack Suella Braverman. You can't say vote Remain in the EU referendum, but you can comment on current issues. So there are going to be judgments involved here, but it would restrict some of the tweets that Gary and others have done in the past.
Yeah, and that could be... I mean, the words that are coming into my head are grey area, and I can see this full of them.
Yeah, it has got grey areas. It's got judgment in there, which means that you're going to need the talent, the presenters, to abide by the letter of the guidelines and the spirit of them.
Yeah.
And I think the BBC could have said, you know, if you earn £1.4 million a year from the BBC, you don't tweet and you just play by the rules. They've actually gone for, I think, a sensible compromise here, but it does take two sides to compromise.
Of course.
I hope people aren't going to be pushing it and trying to test where the boundaries are too much.
So... could Gary Lineker tweet it at all about politics while he's on air? Or is it only certain things he can say? Or is he not allowed to go there at all?
As I read this is really in the theology of the BBC. As I read it, Gary can say, I support refugees and refugees should be looked after compassionately. What he can't do is say Suella Braverman is wrong on the small boats.
Right.
So you can't attack specific politicians or look like you're taking a political side.
And it's becoming increasingly difficult, isn't it? Because, you know, Gary Lineker's points were that, you know, he doesn't work in news, he's not a journalist, he's not an employee of the BBC, he's a freelancer, he works there, but he works elsewhere, does lots of other jobs. And therefore, you know, why would he be censored at all? His views on politics have no bearing on his job presenting Match of the Day.
Well, there's a good argument in the report that they've written today, which says that the BBC has to be about universality. It has to want everyone to be able to pay the licence fee. And if you have all its presenters appearing to be on one side of a political debate, it's not very helpful. And I think if you ask the question, if you were a BBC manager, was it a good or bad thing that Gary Lineker, as its highest paid presenter, was tweeting on one side of the EU referendum? It was clearly not a good idea to have presenters on one side of that argument. So I think this argument says, actually, you know what? We serve the whole of the people of this country, and we shouldn't look like we're against half the population or whatever it is sensible, and you'd hope that presenters would see the point of that.
Could they... I mean, the other suggestion many people made was that it should be far simpler than that. If you work in news, if you're a journalist, freelance or otherwise, then you don't tweet about stuff. But if you don't, anything goes. What would be the downside of that?
The problem then is that if you let Gary Lineker tweet anything that he wants, and I work with Gary. Gary is a clever and nice man, and he knows exactly what he's doing. But it then means that you let everybody on every BBC local radio station or on 5 Live overnight or whatever tweet whatever they want. And then I think you do have a problem. You don't really want BBC staff who are supposed to be impartial and representing the whole of the country starting to pile in on current debates. So if you let one do it, the problem is you've got to let everybody do it. That's why this is quite clever, because it identifies the flagship programmes where you have to stick by the rules.
There it is, Roger. Thank you. Roger Mosey, former BBC editorial director, with his view on that. I don't fully know the answer. Look, I'm as intrigued by the psychology of Gary Lineker as anyone else. All right, I find him a kind of curious character. I don't know the man. I know that, you know, he was an incredibly good England international, and I think I'm right in saying, Rick, he never got a yellow card even. Is that right, in his career? He played clean, he played good, and he was a talent, and he flogs Walker's crisps, which I quite like as well. So I haven't really got... It does annoy me. His tweets do annoy me because they are, you know, for a multi-millionaire, it always sounds a bit weird when people start going all Marxist on Twitter. And it does, I know intellectually you are entitled to a view, no matter how much money you've got. I get that, but it does always feel... It's strange. But I'm also... not in his defence specifically, but in defence of people like him, I'm quite uncomfortable that the state broadcaster says you're not allowed to have a view because you present a football programme. When you put it like that, I think, you know, Lineker might be annoying to you. His tweets might send you doolally. You may discombobulate into a stew of incredulity when you read what he's written. But that should not remove his right to say it. So, you know, when the free speech thing comes in, and that's been under the microscope for lots of reasons in the last 24, 48 hours, there might be an argument to say, actually, he should let him do it. Let him do what he likes. He presents a flipping football programme, for God's sake, not Panorama.